$1.4 million. Stolen from the United States government. Not by a criminal mastermind, not by a tech genius, not by a Wall Street executive. By a 74-year-old man who spent his entire career filing paperwork in a windowless office in Tucson, Arizona. His name was Robert Eugene Marsh, and for 22 years, he received 2 Social Security checks every single month. Same amount, same day, different bank accounts. The system paid him twice, and nobody knew. Not the FBI, not the IRS, not the Social Security Administration. Nobody. Until December 14, 2023, when an anonymous email arrived at the Phoenix SSA office. 7 words. Robert Marsh is robbing you blind. Check. What investigators found wasn't just fraud. It was a ghost in the machine. A hack so elegant, so perfectly hidden, that it had been running on autopilot since April 2001. Robert Marsh had discovered a flaw in the federal benefit system that nobody else knew existed. And he exploited it for over 2 decades. This is how he did it. This is how he almost got away with it. And this is why he might still be the smartest criminal you've never heard of. My name doesn't matter. What matters is what's in these files. 3,000 pages of evidence, bank statements, digital forensics, witness testimonies. And at the center of it all, one man who spent 40 years being invisible. When SSA investigator Maria Delgado opened that anonymous email on December 14, 2023, she almost deleted it. She got tips like this every week. Paranoid neighbors, bitter ex-wives, people who thought their landlord was a Russian spy. But something about this one felt different. The message was too specific, too confident. So she ran the name. Robert Eugene Marsh. Social Security number, 546-789214. Date of birth, March 3, 1949. Retired April 2001. Monthly benefit, $2,147. Direct deposit to Wells Fargo account ending in 4782. Everything checked out. Clean record. No flags. No audits. Just another retiree in Arizona collecting his pension. But Delgado had been with the SSA for 19 years. She knew the system. And something felt off, so she pulled the complete payment history. Every transaction, every deposit. Going back to April 2001, that's when she saw it. 2 payments, every month. Same amount, same Social Security number, different bank accounts. April 2001, $2,147 to Wells Fargo account 4782, $2,147 to Bank of America account 9156. May 2001, $2,847 to Wells Fargo, $2,847 to Bank of America. June 2001, $2,847, $2,847, 528 consecutive months, 22 years, $1.48 million. Delgado stared at her screen for 10 minutes. Then she called her supervisor. Within 6 hours, the case was flagged to the Office of the Inspector General. Within 24 hours, FBI Special Agent Kevin Larson was sitting in a conference room in Phoenix with a team of forensic accountants, IRS investigators, and cybercrime specialists. They all had the same question: how did nobody catch this? The answer was more disturbing than the crime itself. The system had caught it, over 500 times. Every month, an automated audit flagged the duplicate payment. Every month, the flag was cleared, manually, by someone with administrative access, someone who knew exactly which codes to enter, which boxes to check, which logs to erase. The FBI traced the digital fingerprints. Every flag was cleared from the same workstation. Terminal ID, TUC-SSA 047. Location, Social Security Administration Regional Office, 4045 South Cherry Avenue, Tucson, Arizona. The terminal belonged to Robert Eugene Marsh, and he had retired in April 2001, 22 years ago. The same month the double payments started. But here's what made Agent Larson's hands shake when he read the report. Robert Marsh shouldn't have had access to clear those flags. Data entry clerks don't have that level of clearance. Only senior administrators. GS-13 pay grade and above. So how did a GS-7 clerk bypass the most secure federal database in the country? The answer goes back 36 years, to 1987. when the Social Security Administration began digitizing 70 million paper files, and when Robert Eugene Marsh learned how to become a ghost. Robert Eugene Marsh was born in Flagstaff, Arizona, to Eugene and Dorothy Marsh. His father worked maintenance at the Lowell Observatory. His mother was a school teacher. Robert was their only child. Quiet kid, smart, really smart. Graduated top of his class at Flagstaff High School in 1967, full scholarship to Arizona State University for computer science. But in 1968, Robert dropped out. No explanation in his records. He bounced between odd jobs, gas stations, grocery stores. In 1971, he took the postal exam and scored perfect. Started as a mail sorter in Phoenix. By 1985, he transferred to the SSA regional office. Data entry, filing. Nobody paid attention to Robert Marsh, and that's exactly what he wanted. His coworkers described him as polite but distant. Never went to office parties. Never talked about his personal life. One former colleague, Patricia Hinojosa, told investigators, "Robert was like furniture. You knew he was there, but you never really saw him." But Robert saw everything. He watched the system, learned how benefits were calculated, how payments were processed, how the databases communicated with the Treasury Department. And in 1989, Robert discovered something nobody else had noticed. A flaw, a tiny crack in the system's architecture. The SSA database used a redundancy protocol. If a payment failed to process, the system would automatically retry with a backup routing number. But here's the critical part. The system didn't verify that the backup routing was different from the original. It just retried. And if both routing numbers were valid bank accounts, both payments would go through. The system would flag it for review, eventually. But eventually could be weeks, months, and if someone knew how to clear those flags before they reached human eyes, the payments would continue. Forever. Robert didn't act immediately. He waited 12 years. From 1989 to 2001, he showed up to work every day, filed his paperwork, clocked in at 8:02 a.m., clocked out at 4:58 p.m. Never late, never absent. The perfect employee. But during those 12 years, Robert was building something. A map, a blueprint of every security protocol, every administrative password, every supervisor override code in the Tucson SSA office. He memorized shift rotations, audit schedules, server maintenance windows. He knew when the system was vulnerable, and he knew exactly how long he had. In 1997, Robert volunteered for a special project. The SSA was upgrading their legacy mainframe systems to a new Oracle database platform. They needed experienced clerks to help migrate millions of records. Robert worked overtime, weekends, holidays. His supervisor, Gerald Whitmore, wrote in his performance review, "Robert Marsh is the most dedicated employee I've managed in 23 years. His attention to detail is extraordinary." What Gerald didn't know was that Robert wasn't just migrating data. He was planting seeds, dormant code, invisible to standard audits, triggered only by specific conditions that Robert himself would create. Years later, in March 2001, Robert filed for early retirement. He was 52 years old. He had worked for the federal government for 30 years. His pension was approved without question. Monthly benefit, $2,847. Direct deposit to Wells Fargo. On April 13, 2001, Robert received his first Social Security payment. On April 14th, he received his second. Same amount. Different bank. Bank of America. Account opened 3 months earlier under his name. Legitimate ID. Legitimate Social Security number. Nothing unusual. The system flagged it. Terminal TUC SSA 047 cleared the flag. Robert's old workstation. But Robert had retired. He wasn't even in the building. Except he was. Sort of. What Robert had created during those 4 years of database migration wasn't just dormant code. It was a digital clone. A phantom administrator account. Invisible to human auditors. Activated only when duplicate payments triggered specific error codes. The phantom logged in, cleared the flags, logged out, all within 17 seconds. Faster than any human could work, but slow enough to look human. The FBI's cybercrime unit would later describe it as one of the most sophisticated long-term hacks they'd ever encountered, not because of technical complexity, but because of patience. Robert had spent 12 years learning the system, 4 years building the exploit, and 22 years letting it run. No changes, no updates, no greed, just 2 payments every month, like clockwork. So what did Robert Marsh do with $1.4 million over 22 years? Agent Larson expected yachts, sports cars, offshore accounts, Swiss bank boxes, the usual playbook for white-collar criminals. What he found instead made the case even stranger. Robert lived at 2847 East Elm Street in Tucson, a modest ranch house, 1,500 square feet, built in 1974. He bought it in 1993 for $82,000, cash. He drove a 1998 Toyota Camry, silver, 212,000 miles on the odometer. He shopped at the same Safeway every Thursday at 3 p.m. He ate dinner at Denny's every Sunday at 6 p.m. Always ordered the same thing: pot roast, black coffee, no dessert. His neighbors described him as quiet, polite, a man who kept to himself. Margaret Chen, who lived next door for 18 years, said, "Robert mowed his lawn every Saturday morning. He'd wave, say good morning. That was it. I don't think I ever had a real conversation with him. No vacations, no luxury purchases, no conspicuous consumption. The Bank of America account received the duplicate payments, but Robert rarely touched it. The money just accumulated, month after month, year after year. The forensic accountants traced every transaction. The Wells Fargo account covered his living expenses, utilities, groceries, property taxes, basic existence. The Bank of America account was different. Between 2001 and 2023, Robert made exactly 47 withdrawals. Always cash. Always in amounts under $10,000 to avoid federal reporting requirements. Total withdrawn, $318,000. Where did that money go? It took the FBI 3 months to find out. And when they did, the case took a turn nobody expected. Robert Eugene Marsh had been sending the money to the Philippines, to an organization called St. Catherine's Children's Home in Manila, an orphanage run by Catholic nuns, housing 86 children, ages 3 to 17. Sister Lucia Reyes, the orphanage director, spoke to investigators via video call on February 8, 2024. She was crying. "Mr. Marsh has been our most generous donor for 20 years. He saved this place. We were going to close in 2003. No funding, no support. Then Mr. Marsh started sending money. Every few months. He never asked for recognition. Never visited. He just sent money. And letters. Beautiful letters about the children, about giving them hope. The FBI verified it. $318,000. All of it went to St. Catherine's, school supplies, medical care, food, new dormitories, scholarships for older children. Robert Marsh had embezzled money from the United States government and used it to fund an orphanage on the other side of the world. Agent Larson sat in his car outside Robert's house on February 12, 2024. He had the warrant. He had the evidence. He had the team waiting 2 blocks away. But he didn't move. He just sat there, looking at this small house on a quiet street in Tucson, trying to understand the man inside. Was Robert Marsh a criminal? Absolutely. He had committed federal fraud on a massive scale. But was he a villain? That was harder to answer. At 7:32 a.m., Larson knocked on Robert's door. Robert Eugene Marsh answered the door in a gray cardigan and slippers. He looked at Agent Larson's badge, then at the 3 FBI vehicles parked in his driveway, then back at Larson, and he smiled. Not a nervous smile, not a defiant smile, a tired smile. "I was wondering when you'd come," Robert said. "Would you like some coffee?" Larson had arrested hundreds of suspects in his 21-year career. Drug dealers, murderers, con artists, corrupt politicians. None of them had ever offered him coffee. They sat at Robert's kitchen table, Formica, cracked in one corner, a single chair on each side. Larson read Robert his rights. Robert nodded, said he understood, declined a lawyer. Then he asked, "How did you find out?" Larson told him about the anonymous email, the investigation, the forensic audit, the digital fingerprints, everything. Robert listened, sipping his coffee. When Larson finished, Robert was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "It was Dorothy." "Who's Dorothy?" Larson asked. "My mother. She died in December. Lung cancer. I was with her at the end. At hospice in Phoenix. She made me promise something. She said, 'Robert, you're a good man, but you've been carrying something heavy for a long time. I can see it. Whatever it is, let it go. Make peace.' 2 days after she died, I sent the email to the SSA about myself. I couldn't do it anymore." Larson stared at him. "You turned yourself in?" Robert nodded. "I knew it would end eventually. It always does. I just wanted to choose when." The confession took 4 hours. Robert explained everything. The flaw he discovered in 1989, the 12 years of preparation, the phantom administrator account, the backup routing exploit. He walked them through the code, drew diagrams on yellow legal pads, answered every question. No lawyer, no resistance, just a man unburdening himself. When Larson asked why Robert had done it, Robert was quiet again. Then he said, "My mother was a teacher. She taught elementary school in Flagstaff for 38 years. She loved those kids, every single one. She'd spend her own money on supplies, books, snacks for the ones who came to school hungry. She retired in 1991. Her pension was $642 a month. She worked her entire life, gave everything to those children, and the government gave her $642. Robert looked out the window, at his small backyard, the cactus garden he'd maintained for 20 years. "I thought about stealing the money for myself. I really did. But I couldn't. It felt wrong, but letting it go back to a system that pays my mother $600 after 40 years, that felt wrong too. So I found a middle ground. I took what the system was too broken to notice was missing, and I gave it to children who needed it more than any government bureaucrat." Larson asked, "Do you regret it?" Robert thought about it. Then he said, "I regret the crime. I don't regret the outcome." At 11:47 a.m. on February 12, 2024, Robert Eugene Marsh was arrested and charged with wire fraud, theft of government funds, and unauthorized access to a federal computer system. Total potential sentence, 60 years. He was 74 years old. But the story doesn't end there. Because what happened next revealed something even more disturbing about the system Robert had exploited. On March 3, 2024, Robert Marsh's case hit the national news. The headlines were predictable. Retiree steals $1.4 million in Social Security scam. Arizona man hacks federal database for 2 decades. Elderly fraudster faces life in prison. But something unexpected happened. The public response wasn't outrage. It was sympathy. Within 48 hours, a GoFundMe page appeared. Legal Defense Fund for Robert Marsh. It raised $230,000 in 6 days. News outlets interviewed Sister Lucia from St. Catherine's Orphanage. She appeared on Good Morning America via satellite, showed photos of the children, the new school building, the medical clinic, all funded by Robert's stolen money. Social media exploded. Free Robert Marsh trended for 3 days. Legal experts debated the case on CNN. Ethicists argued on NPR. Was Robert a criminal or a modern Robin Hood? Did intent matter? Did the outcome justify the means? But while the public debated morality, something else was happening behind the scenes. The Social Security Administration launched an internal audit. If Robert Marsh could exploit the system for 22 years, who else could? What they found was catastrophic. On April 18, 2024, SSA Inspector General Thomas Keller testified before a Senate Oversight Committee. His report was classified, but portions were leaked to the Washington Post 3 days later. The contents were damning. Robert Marsh wasn't the only one. He was just the first one they'd caught. The phantom administrator exploit Robert created wasn't unique. It was just uniquely well hidden. The audit uncovered 17 similar cases. 17 other federal employees who had discovered the same flaw, or variations of it. Some had been running for decades, others for just a few years. Total estimated theft, $47 million. And those were just the ones they found. The system was broken, fundamentally. The redundancy protocol Robert had exploited was designed in 1983. Never updated, never patched. Security through obscurity. The SSA had assumed nobody would find it, nobody would understand it, nobody would have the patience to exploit it. Robert Marsh had all three. Senator Elizabeth Hartman from Oregon chaired the Oversight Committee. On April 22nd, she gave a statement that would define the case. "We are prosecuting Robert Marsh for exposing a vulnerability that our own government ignored for 40 years. He stole money. That's a crime. But he also revealed a systemic failure that has cost taxpayers tens of millions of dollars. Maybe more. We need to ask ourselves, who is really to blame here?" The DOJ didn't appreciate that question. On May 1st, 2024, they offered Robert a plea deal. Plead guilty to one count of wire fraud. Serve 18 months in minimum security federal prison. Pay restitution of $1.4 million. Forfeit all assets. In exchange, they'd drop the other charges. Robert's court-appointed attorney, Sandra Gomez, told him to take it. 18 months at 74 was manageable. The alternative was a trial, a conviction, decades in prison. He'd die there. Robert refused. "I want a trial," he told her. "I want them to explain in open court how their system was so broken that a clerk with a high school education could rob them for 22 years. I want that on the record." Sandra tried to reason with him. The evidence was overwhelming. The jury wouldn't care about orphans or broken systems, they'd see a thief. But Robert was adamant. So on June 3rd, 2024, the case went to trial. United States versus Robert Eugene Marsh. Federal District Court, Phoenix, Arizona. Judge Harold Chen presiding. The trial lasted 9 days. The prosecution presented their case methodically. Bank records, digital forensics, expert testimony. They proved beyond any doubt that Robert had committed the crimes. The defense didn't dispute the facts. Instead, Sandra Gomez did something unusual. She put the system on trial. She called Gerald Whitmore, Robert's former supervisor. He testified that in 37 years with the SSA, he'd never seen anyone work harder or know the system better than Robert Marsh. She called Maria Delgado, the investigator who discovered the fraud. Delgado admitted under oath that the SSA had ignored over 500 automated flags. She called Dr. Raymond Park, a cybersecurity expert from MIT. Dr. Park testified that the exploit Robert used was so fundamental, so obvious to anyone who understood database architecture, that its existence for 40 years constituted gross negligence by the federal government. And then Sandra called Robert. Robert Eugene Marsh took the stand on June 11, 2024. The courtroom was packed. Media, activists, curious citizens. Agent Larson sat in the back row, watching. Sandra asked Robert to explain how he'd discovered the flaw. Robert did. In detail, using language a jury could understand. He explained the redundancy protocol, the backup routing system, the phantom administrator account. He walked them through every step. 12 years of preparation, 4 years of implementation, 22 years of execution. Then Sandra asked, "Why didn't you just report the flaw to your supervisors?" Robert looked at the jury. "I tried. In 1991, I wrote a memo, explained the vulnerability, submitted it to my supervisor, Benjamin Torres. He never responded. I followed up twice, nothing. In 1994, I tried again with a different supervisor, same result. The system worked. That's all they cared about. Nobody wanted to hear that it was broken, because fixing it would be expensive, complicated, easier to pretend everything was fine." Sandra presented the memos. dated, signed, filed in Robert's personnel records. The prosecution objected, said the memos didn't excuse the crime. Judge Chen sustained the objection, but the jury had seen them. Then came the question everyone was waiting for. Sandra asked, "Mr. Marsh, you stole $1.4 million from the federal government over 22 years. Where did that money go?" Robert didn't hesitate. $318,000 went to St. Catherine's Children's Home in Manila. The rest stayed in the Bank of America account. I never touched it. I didn't steal for profit. I stole to prove a point. What point? That the system is rotten, that it fails the people it's supposed to protect. My mother worked 40 years and got $600 a month. I worked 30 years and discovered I could steal millions without anyone noticing. That's not a bug. That's by design. The system doesn't care about people like my mother. It cares about maintaining itself. The prosecution objected again. Judge Chen told Robert to answer the questions and avoid speeches. But the damage was done. The jury had heard him. Cross-examination was brutal. Assistant U.S. Attorney Michael Brennan hammered Robert for 3 hours. Why didn't he go to the media? Why didn't he go to Congress? Why not blow the whistle legally? Robert's answer was always the same. I tried. Nobody listened. Brennan asked, "So you decided to become a criminal?" Robert looked at him. "I decided to do something. You're right. It was criminal. But tell me, what would you have done? Spent 40 years filing memos nobody reads? Watching a broken system hurt people and doing nothing? At least I did something." The courtroom erupted. Judge Chen banged his gavel, called a recess. When they returned, Brennan rested his case. Closing arguments happened the next day. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. On June 13, 2024, at 4:47 p.m., they returned a verdict: guilty, on all counts. Robert showed no emotion. Sandra squeezed his hand. The media rushed out to report. Judge Chen set sentencing for August 1, 2024. But something had shifted. The trial had done what Robert wanted. It had exposed the system. And people were paying attention. On July 18, 2024, 2 weeks before sentencing, something happened that nobody expected. The Department of Justice dropped the case, no explanation. Just a one-paragraph statement. After careful review, the United States has determined that continued prosecution is not in the public interest. Behind closed doors, the calculation was simple. The trial had been a PR disaster. The SSA had been humiliated. Congress was demanding answers. Continuing to prosecute a 74-year-old man who'd given the money to orphans while the government's own incompetence was on full display? Political suicide. Robert Eugene Marsh walked out of the courthouse on July 19, 2024. Free. Sort of. He still owed $1.4 million in restitution. His assets were seized. His house, his car, his bank accounts. He had nothing. But Sister Lucia from St. Catherine's started a fund. Not for legal fees this time, for Robert. It raised $412,000 in 2 weeks. Enough to buy a small apartment in Tucson, a used car, a modest life. The last time anyone saw Robert Marsh was September 2024. A reporter from the New York Times tracked him down, asked him if he'd do it again. Robert thought about it. Then he said, "The system is still broken. They haven't fixed anything. They just got better at hiding it, so yeah. If I had to do it again, I probably would, but smarter, quieter, so they'd never find me." Robert Eugene Marsh died on November 3, 2024. Heart attack. At home, alone. He was 75 years old. The Social Security Administration issued a statement, said they were reviewing protocols, enhancing security, preventing future fraud. But nothing changed. The system is still there. The flaw is still there. Just waiting for the next person smart enough, patient enough, desperate enough to exploit it. Because Robert Marsh wasn't special. He was just the one who got caught. And somewhere out there in a windowless office in a forgotten corner of the federal bureaucracy, someone else is watching, learning, waiting. The ghost is still in the machine, and it's hungry.